What is up, everybody? Welcome to the third and final installment of this Premier League season preview series. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the Touchline Talk YouTube channel. We've talked about breaking teams down into tiers. We have talked about some bold predictions. And now, one of my favorite topics that I like to use is storylines. So I've got 5 big storylines that I'm looking at as kind of the things that are going to define this Premier League season and kind of the biggest things to be looking out for as the season gets underway. Number one is quite simply all of the new managers, and we have some very interesting ones that make this a fascinating Premier League season coming up here. Fabian Hurstler at Brighton. Kind of this, wonder kid, never managed on this level before. Can he get Brighton back to where they were 2 seasons ago? Can he kind of stop the downward trajectory of last season? Enzo Maresca at Chelsea. So many reasons. Never managed a top flight game. Not exactly the highest profile manager in terms of replacing Mauricio Pochettino. Can he get this team to function at a higher level? What is going on at Chelsea? All of those things. Arne Slot at Liverpool, of course, replacing Jurgen Klopp. How much of a change is it? How much does the style of play actually get altered? Is he able to continue and keep Liverpool near the top of the league and keep them in the conversation for a Premier League title? Kieran McKenna at Ipswich. He's been doing a phenomenal job. Can he keep the magic going? Do they have any chance of staying up? If not, what happens to him next? Does he go back down to the Championship? Does he find a way to kind of fail upwards the way that Vincent Kompany did? Julian Lopetegui at West Ham. New era for West Ham. Plenty of frustration with David Moyes. It was time to turn the page, get a fresh start. What does this look like? Can he elevate them immediately? How do we kind of view what he's able to do in the context of the David Moyes era, both the good and the bad? And then Russell Martin at Southampton. Also, haven't seen him at the Premier League level before. Big club, obviously, that has aspirations of staying up. Can he make that happen? What are we going to kind of learn about him and his team this season as well? You can just go down the list, but there are plenty of fascinating questions and storylines regarding the managers in the Premier League this season, specifically the new ones. Number 2. It is PSR, and it is the potential punishments coming from it. There are multiple different angles here, and I'm also roping Manchester City into this. So, you got multiple things going on. From a PSR standpoint first, Leicester, when is this punishment getting handed out? I'm assuming there is going to be one. Does that make the difference between them getting promoted, getting relegated, and being able to stay up? What is the punishment versus Nottingham Forest and Everton's last season? All kinds of stuff there. Then you've got the Aston Villa side, and then also, does anybody else end up getting punished this time? Is this kind of the end? Just what happens next in this PSR saga? And then the other side of this is for a club like Aston Villa, who have clearly had to make some moves in the window and to sell to be able to buy in order to be compliant with PSR. How much of an impact does that end up having on their season? They had to sell some really important pieces in order to keep things in line financially. So I'm curious about that aspect of this as well. And then I threw the punishments part in there, not only because of PSR, but also Manchester City, because that is the other big thing that is sitting here. Does this punishment actually or does this case get resolved? Is there a punishment? If so, how significant is it? If it's a significant punishment, does that weigh on Pep Guardiola and the way that he views his future with this contract situation, him being in his last season? And then you get into the bigger questions about, legacy and what it means. And there'll be plenty of time to discuss all that once there's actually a ruling on all the Manchester City stuff. But there is a lot of off the field stuff going on that could have some major implications on this season and the Premier League moving forward. So that is storyline number 2. Of course, the title race, always a storyline. Some specific questions here. Number 1, how many teams are involved? You certainly expect City and Arsenal to be there. Can a Liverpool, can a Manchester United, a Chelsea get in there? I'm skeptical. I really see this as a 3-team race at the most, and that's assuming Liverpool look like the same team they did last season and probably even improve upon that to be able to hang with Arsenal and City. But I expect Arsenal to be there and to push Manchester City again. The question for Arsenal is, do they have anything else left? Can they take one more step? Because what they did last season, as impressive as it was, I just don't think it's good enough to beat City. It's good enough to push City for 38 games, but it's not good enough to actually overtake them. Can Arsenal find a way to get 3-5 more points and also be as good head-to-head against the other top teams in the league as they were this season? Because that's really the secret, and I talked about this. That's why they were able to stay in that title race, is the head-to-head success they had. That's going to be part of this equation too. Can they replicate that? And then for Manchester City, of course, the bigger questions are the 115 charges, Pep Guardiola's future, but specifically to the title race. Can they actually start a season well? Because this has been a kind of a theme now, that there's always it's inevitable, they're going to catch them, they're going to go on a tear and win 15 straight at the end of the season, and yes, they've been able to do that the past couple seasons. But the point I've been making throughout all this is, statistically, compared to what they've been in the past, they have not been good in the Premier League. They are putting up point totals that are attainable, as Arsenal proved last season. If they can go start with 8, 9, 10 straight wins and actually be on top from the beginning, this all feels and looks different. But the storyline the past couple seasons has been, can anybody who has jumped, specifically Arsenal, jumped out to the lead, hold on to it? Is City still the favorite? If City jump out to a lead, that conversation changes. That's a different kind of storyline. So that's something I'm looking for in the title race conversation as well. Next, the other one you've always got to include, the relegation battle. Sort of some similar questions of, okay, how many teams are involved and who gets dragged into it. Usually there's maybe a team or two you don't necessarily expect. You've got some teams that struggled last season. Brentford had a down season after some good performances. Can they regroup? Nottingham Forest has kind of been that team that's just been able to survive. Everton to a certain extent, although Everton without points deductions were not a relegation candidate at all last season. They were solidly mid-table. And then you've got the 3 promoted teams, and I've made this point before too, that Southampton, Leicester squads may not be all that formidable. Leicester may be dealing with a points deduction. But from a club standpoint, you have 2 clubs coming up that are Premier League clubs in terms of size and recent success and just kind of where they belong in the European hierarchy. Now, maybe Southampton is kind of in the 20 to 25 range in terms of, biggest clubs out there. Leicester certainly is in the top 20. So these are 2 clubs that expect, not necessarily in the context of where they are right now and what the squad looks like and the challenge ahead of them in terms of trying to stay up, but generally speaking, these are 2 teams that expect to be in the Premier League. And so you've got and then you've got another one in Leeds United still down in the Championship. But you don't usually have 2 clubs of this stature coming up like this. And then you also have the very interesting dynamic of Ipswich Town and Kieran McKenna and what they've been able to do and whether they can create some magic and find a way to stay up too. I do think this could turn into a really, really interesting relegation battle with clubs that don't really have any business or don't see themselves as championship clubs, that aren't just ready to embrace kind of going up and down the way that your Norwich Cities or West Broms or somebody like that is willing to just kind of yo-yo between the leagues and accept whatever happens. Finally, this is the other one I'm really interested in. There is a lot on the line for some of the big six and the bigger clubs out there, but I'm going to keep it to the big six. Of course, I'll just address it one more time. You've got everything going on at Liverpool, post-Klopp era. What does this look like? Can Arne Slot continue what Klopp has built? All of those things. That really, to me, is secondary in this conversation. It's three other clubs I want to highlight here. Manchester United. They decided to keep Ten Hag after basically deciding not to. Big transfer window again. He's bringing in more Ajax guys, at least reportedly. They might be done by the time this video actually airs. He's getting backed in the market. There is no excuse. It has to be better. If not, he's going to go. And how long of a leash does he have? If they struggle in the first 10 games, is he gone immediately? How patient are United willing to be after almost letting go of him last season? Chelsea. This has got to turn into results at some point. They're buying all these players again. There doesn't seem to be a plan. And now you have a lot of really frustrated fans, not only because they're not producing on the field, but after what happened with Pochettino and the fact that Conor Gallagher was basically kicked out of the club for PSR purposes. There is a lot of pressure on Maresca, on the ownership to make this work. And then the other one I'm really curious about is Tottenham. You don't know after last season whether Ange Postecoglou's stubbornness and his determination to play his way no matter what was good, bad, indifferent, what the impact of it was. Because it worked for a while. Teams had the ability to adjust. Some of his best players and his most important players, i.e. Mickey Van de Ven, in terms of the way he wants to play, got hurt. So I don't put the end of the season and the kind of the collapse on him either. We don't know how much of it was his style of play and his stubbornness, how much of it was the injuries, how much of it was the squad not being good enough. Assuming those key players can stay healthier this season, to me, this is when we're really going to learn just how good Postecoglou is, whether he's the right man for this job moving forward long term, and whether his refusal to do anything but what he originally wants to, his determination to never veer away from plan A, that plan B is doing plan A better, is ultimately going to be his downfall. Because there are plenty of Spurs fans who are frustrated by that, and rightfully so. We just don't know if that frustration is valid or if it's ultimately going to work, because he deserves time to be able to implement this. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. Now he's had a season, another transfer window, brought in the big-time striker I have major questions about. Let's see how all of this goes and how we feel about Postecoglou at the end of season number 2. That is all for the storylines. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.